Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your passport to the stories that matter, globe showing Europe, Africa. I'm thrilled you're here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from around the world. Chapter 1, An Invitation to Greystone Hall. It was during an unusually golden September when Hercule Poirot, the famous Belgian detective, received an invitation most unexpected. He had just concluded a leisurely breakfast, precisely 2 boiled eggs, a slice of warm brioche, and a small, exquisite portion of apricot preserve, when Georges, his unflappably solemn valet, brought in the morning post. "Only one letter today, sir," Georges said, laying it on the silver tray with a pair of immaculate gloves. "By hand, no stamp." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Ah? Curious." He examined the envelope. Cream-colored, thick, expensive paper. The return address read, Greystone Hall, Upper Wykeford, Gloucestershire. A family crest, a lion rampant with a laurel wreath, was embossed on the seal. Most intriguing. Poirot slit the envelope with care and read the contents. A neat, sloping hand wrote, "My dear M. Poirot, though we are but slightly acquainted, I find myself compelled to seek your professional advice on a matter of considerable delicacy. It concerns not murder, I assure you, but something which threatens to become a scandal if left unresolved. I cannot commit the details to writing. Please, would you consider joining us at Greystone Hall this coming Friday for the weekend? Yours sincerely, Lady Winifred Marchmont." Poirot read it twice, then set it down slowly. "Georges," he said, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You recall Lady Marchmont? The widow of Colonel Archibald Marchmont?" "I believe so, sir. A formidable woman. Camellias in winter. A penchant for Spanish lace." "Just so." Poirot smiled faintly. "And not given to melodrama. If she calls it a matter of delicacy, then it is likely to be much more." 2 days later, Poirot arrived at Greystone Hall. It was a fine estate, the kind built by men with imperial moustaches and firm opinions about the colonies. Built of pale limestone and adorned with ivy that had crept across its walls like time itself, Greystone Hall sat dignified among the Cotswold Hills, its gardens perfectly manicured and dotted with late summer dahlias. Poirot's arrival was greeted by a footman with the kind of expression usually reserved for tacksmen and toothaches. He was shown into a grand vestibule, where the scent of beeswax polish mingled with old wood and faint tobacco smoke. Lady Marchmont entered moments later. She was tall, angular, and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy dress that brooked no nonsense. Her greying hair was swept into an elegant chignon. She extended one gloved hand. "M. Poirot. How very good of you to come." "Madam, it is my pleasure." "A mystery, you say? And not of blood but of delicacy, this I cannot resist." Her smile was wan. "You may yet regret it." As they made their way to the drawing-room, Poirot took stock of the hall's decor, family portraits, Regency furniture, a faint crack in the Cornish marble of the fireplace. Everything was orderly. Controlled. But too controlled, perhaps. "Most of the other guests have arrived," Lady Marchmont said. "We are 7 this weekend, including you. My niece, Clarissa, is here. As is Dr. Ellingham, our longtime physician. Theodore Blake, a botanist and friend of the family. And Mr. Harold Quince, a business acquaintance of my late husband's. And now, suitor to Clarissa, though that is perhaps a generous word." "Ah," Poirot murmured. "A lively gathering, then. You might call it that." They entered the drawing-room, where tea was being served by a housemaid who moved with practiced silence. For guests were already assembled. Clarissa Marchmont, in her mid-twenties, possessed the kind of beauty that leaned toward severity, high cheekbones, dark eyes, and an expression that suggested she had already assessed and dismissed you. She wore a jade green dress that accentuated her cool demeanor. Next to her, Dr. Basil Ellingham, lean and precise, with silver-rimmed spectacles and the quiet air of a man who measured his words as carefully as his prescriptions. He nodded politely at Poirot. Theodore Blake, in contrast, seemed almost ethereal, tall, stooped, with wispy hair and fingers stained from soil or ink, or perhaps both. He offered a nervous smile, then returned to examining a small leather notebook. And then there was Mr. Harold Quince. Heavy-set, expensively dressed, and loud in both voice and presence, Quince laughed too readily and spoke as if trying to impress an invisible jury. He extended a thick hand to Poirot. "So you're the famous detective, eh? Heard of you. Belgian chap, always solving the big ones." Poirot inclined his head modestly. "I have some small success, yes." Quince smirked and turned to Clarissa. "Maybe he'll find out who's been hiding the biscuits, eh?" Clarissa said nothing. Poirot took his tea and observed. The tension in the room was as clear as steam above a kettle. Everyone smiled, but few eyes met for long. Something unsaid hung in the air. It was Clarissa who broke the silence. "So, Aunt Winifred, have you finally decided to tell everyone what's been stolen?" Lady Marchmont's teacup froze halfway to her lips. "I think now is not the moment." "Why not?" "Everyone already suspects each other. You've all but confessed you don't trust any of us." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Something has been stolen?" "Yes," said Clarissa, sharply. "A secret. The kind that makes people do very stupid things." Before more could be said, Lady Marchmont rose. Poirot, if I may speak with you privately." "Of course, madam." They retired to her study, a quiet, wood-panelled room filled with books and faint traces of old pipe smoke. Once the door was shut, Lady Marchmont sat down and folded her hands. "My husband kept a diary. Not a personal one, a war journal. He served with military intelligence during the Second World War. There were things he recorded, not for publication. Matters of national interest. Some of it, frankly, dangerous even now." Poirot's expression sharpened. "You believe it was stolen?" "It disappeared from the family safe 2 weeks ago. No sign of forced entry. The safe is hidden, only Clarissa and I know where it is." "Did your husband speak of enemies?" "No. But perhaps he did not know them." Poirot rose and smoothed his lapels. "Madam, you were wise to call upon me. A diary, a thief among the trusted, a secret worth silence, this is not a simple theft. It is a puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, do not leave puzzles unsolved." Lady Marchmont offered a wan smile. "Then I hope, for all our sakes, you find the truth before the silence becomes something worse." Poirot bowed. His little grey cells were already whirring. Chapter 2, A Locked Room and a Missing Key. The following morning dawned soft and cool, with mist curling along the hedgerows and dew glistening on the Greystone Hall lawns like scattered diamonds. Hercule Poirot, always an early riser, enjoyed his morning chocolate precisely at 7:30, then requested an immediate inspection of the study from Lady Marchmont. The room in question was located at the far end of the east wing. It was a handsome space, oak-panelled walls, high windows draped in forest green velvet, and a broad writing desk that had once belonged, Lady Marchmont said with faint pride, to the Prime Minister's grandfather. A heavy Persian rug lay at the centre, its crimson pattern worn in places from decades of foot traffic. Bookshelves lined the walls in neat symmetry. And yet, it was the section of paneling behind a brass-framed landscape painting that interested Poirot most. This, Lady Marchmont said, reaching forward, is the family's private safe. Built into the wall. Concealed, as you see. Installed during the war. My husband believed in discretion. She moved the painting aside to reveal a small steel door set flush into the wall. Poirot bent forward, examining the area carefully. You say it was unopened, undisturbed, until 2 weeks ago. Correct. I last accessed it in August. I placed Archibald's diary inside myself. 2 weeks ago, I noticed it was missing. You noticed? Not discovered through force. The door was closed as usual. No sign of tampering. But when I opened it to retrieve some old papers for the solicitor, the diary was gone. Everything else remained. Interesting. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The thief, then, was careful, selective. He straightened, motioning for Lady Marchmont to remain silent. With the utmost delicacy, he leaned forward and began to inspect the panelled wall surrounding the safe. Dust, madam, is a most revealing companion, he murmured, wiping a gloved finger along the wood. It records our movements even when we think we've left no trace. A thin smear appeared where the panel met the floorboard, lighter than the surrounding area. Poirot studied the rug next. He stepped back, then forward again, tracing the perimeter with his gaze. May I? Of course. He knelt, carefully, minding his trousers, and lifted one corner. Beneath the plush weave, the wooden floor was smooth, save for a slight indentation. Poirot gently pressed the board. It gave slightly under pressure. Loose, but not enough to dislodge on its own. Someone stood here, he murmured. Light of foot, careful in action. But this board was moved. He replaced the rug and stood, brushing non-existent dust from his lapels. Who else knows of the safe? Lady Marchmont hesitated. Only Clarissa. Not Mr. Quince. He certainly does not. And your house staff? Your maid, perhaps? No. Mrs. Wren, the housekeeper, has been with us for 20 years. Discreet to a fault. Edwin, the footman, is relatively new. But they are not allowed in here. Poirot nodded. You mentioned the key. Where was it kept? In my dressing room. In a silver trinket box on top of my wardrobe. Was it missing at any time? No. I do not believe so. Poirot steepled his fingers. And yet, someone opened the safe. With no forced entry, the only reasonable conclusion is that the thief had the key, if only briefly. Lady Marchmont's face paled. Are you suggesting someone came into my rooms? I suggest only this: the thief had opportunity, knowledge, and care. That suggests someone close. Someone trusted. But do not despair, madam, nothing remains hidden from Hercule Poirot for long. With her leave, he began his inquiries with the household staff. Mrs. Wren, the housekeeper, was in her usual domain, the linen room. A tall, angular woman with silver hair pinned tightly beneath her cap, she spoke with the composed dignity of one accustomed to both wealth and whispers. I look after the family, sir, but I do not interfere, she said firmly. And no one but Lady Marchmont ever enters that study, unless it's Mr. Blake for his readings. Mr. Blake. The botanist. He uses the books on rare plants. Has permission, though he's always careful. Wouldn't disturb a thing. Did you ever see anyone approach Lady Marchmont's room uninvited? She hesitated. Mr. Quince, once, after supper, said he'd left his handkerchief in the parlour and Lady Marchmont had taken it up by mistake. It sounded odd to me, but I let him pass. I don't go in for scandal, Mr. Poirot. Poirot thanked her, his moustache twitching ever so slightly. Next, he found Edwin polishing silver in the butler's pantry. A nervous young man, Edwin had a habit of fiddling with his cuffs while speaking. I didn't take anything, sir, I swear. I barely go near the study. Did I accuse you, mon ami? No, sir. But you're Poirot. You don't need to. Poirot regarded him gently. Did you notice anything unusual the night Lady Marchmont believes the diary went missing? Edwin thought. Clarissa was out late. Said she was walking in the orchard, but she came in the back way. Didn't say much. Poirot filed it away. A solitary stroll. An unspoken tension. Later that afternoon, Poirot returned to the study alone to observe with fresh eyes. He stood motionless for several minutes, taking in every corner, every shadow. The room was still. But Poirot's instincts told him otherwise. He walked to the safe again, then to the rug. Then to the open window, the only source of fresh air in the room. He sniffed. Lavender, he said softly. Not from the room. Not from Lady Marchmont. From another. It was faint, but present. A modern lavender cologne, perhaps. Not something the older generation would wear. He recalled something he'd noted before, a similar scent on Mr. Quince's sleeve the night before. The memory crystallized. At dinner, Quince had offered Clarissa a napkin, and as he reached across her, a distinct scent had wafted toward Poirot. The scent was now here, in the study. Coincidence? Poirot did not believe in coincidences. As he stood alone in the room, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the safe, he spoke aloud to the empty air. You are here, somewhere. The thief, the motive, the misdirection. But I, Hercule Poirot, I see the order in the chaos. The truth will emerge. He left the study in silence. The threads had begun to tighten. Chapter 3, The Man in the Green Hat. The sun rose higher over Greystone Hall, burning off the morning mist and casting golden shafts through the long windows of the breakfast room. The scent of grilled kippers, marmalade, and fresh coffee hung in the air, but Poirot partook sparingly, his mind was already fully occupied. As the guests gathered for breakfast, he observed their interactions with quiet intensity. Clarissa Marchmont entered last, looking particularly pale beneath her usual poise. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Harold Quince, then away. Dr. Illingham, impeccably calm, asked after Lady Marchmont's health. Theodore Blake arrived late, clutching a crumpled field guide to British mosses, and apologized unnecessarily. Mr. Quince, loud as ever, attempted to dominate conversation. Well, I say, this countryside's all well and good, but there's nothing to do once you've walked around the garden twice. Could be in London by lunchtime, if it weren't for this business with the diary. A hush fell across the table. Clarissa snapped, if you're so bored, Mr. Quince, you're welcome to return to the city. No one is keeping you. Poirot watched the exchange with interest. It was not the first time Clarissa had bristled at the industrialist, nor would it be the last. There was something brittle beneath her sarcasm, a fear or resentment she was doing her best to conceal. After breakfast, the household dispersed. Poirot, ever the observer, took to the gardens under the pretext of exercise. In truth, his eyes were sharp as ever, watching the movement of others across the grounds. It was there, near the edge of the orchard, that he spotted Clarissa again. She was not alone. From the cover of a high hedge, Poirot observed the scene with practiced discretion. A man had emerged from the woods, a stranger, tall, lean, dressed in a brown overcoat and a distinctive green felt hat. He approached Clarissa quickly but cautiously, glancing back over his shoulder. The two stood close. The exchange was quiet, tense. Clarissa passed him something, small, flat, wrapped in a handkerchief. The man took it quickly and slipped it into his coat pocket. Poirot narrowed his eyes. It was not the diary, too small by far, but it was clearly something of significance. Within moments, the stranger disappeared into the trees, and Clarissa turned on her heel, hurrying back toward the house. Poirot stepped into her path as she entered the west garden. "Ah, Mademoiselle Clarissa," he said lightly. "You enjoy your walks as much as I enjoy the precision of an egg timer. Did you find what you were looking for in the orchard?" Clarissa's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. "I beg your pardon. I merely admire your routine. You are fond of the orchard. And solitude." "I was taking air, not reporting to anyone," she said coolly. "Or must I explain my comings and goings to you, Monsieur Poirot?" "Not at all, mademoiselle," Poirot replied, tilting his head. "But I do wonder, was your companion also seeking fresh air?" For a moment, her mask slipped. "You saw?" "I observe many things. It is my profession." Clarissa folded her arms. "That was Philip Kent. A journalist. We knew each other, once. My uncle disapproved." "Indeed. And what was it he took from you?" She hesitated. "Letters. Nothing more. Old ones. I wanted to return them, end that chapter." Poirot gave her a long, quiet look. "If that is the truth, mademoiselle, you have nothing to fear. But you must know this, a secret rarely stays small when concealed with care. It tends to grow." Clarissa's mouth twitched. "Then let it grow. I don't answer to ghosts." She turned and walked away, spine rigid. Poirot watched her go. There was courage in her, yes, but fear, too. Not the fear of exposure, but of damage. Perhaps to someone else. Or perhaps to something already broken. Returning to the house, Poirot found Lady Marchmont reading in the library, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "Lady Marchmont, if I may ask, do you know of a Mr. Philip Kent?" Her eyes narrowed. "Yes." A mistake from Clarissa's past. "He was clever, ambitious, and entirely unsuitable. My husband discovered he was planning to publish a memoir about the war, one that might have contained details Archibald had shared in confidence." "I see. So the man had motive to obtain the diary." Her jaw clenched. "He might. Though Clarissa swore she broke ties with him years ago. If he's returned, that does not bode well. And might I ask, what would happen if the diary were published?" Lady Marchmont hesitated. "Archibald's reputation would suffer. Perhaps worse. It would raise questions about orders he gave, orders which, in hindsight, may seem morally compromised." Poirot nodded slowly. "So we have a valuable object, a former fiancé with ambition, and a household full of people with motives to keep the past buried. Do you believe Philip has the diary?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, madam. It is still close. Very close. The thief may have panicked, but they have not parted with their prize. Not yet." That evening, the atmosphere at dinner was brittle. Conversation meandered awkwardly. Dr. Illingham discussed a new surgical technique, but no one truly listened. Clarissa picked at her food. Quince drank too much wine. Lady Marchmont was pale and distracted. The only one who seemed entirely composed was Theodore Blake, who offered a quiet lecture on the pollination habits of European orchids. Poirot, meanwhile, observed. Not the words, but the silences. The tension when Clarissa caught her aunt's eye. The twitch of Harold Quince's hand every time the diary was mentioned. The way Dr. Illingham watched them all with a surgeon's dispassion. After the meal, Poirot made a point to thank the maid, Lydia, who had served them. She was young, sharp-eyed. "You did well tonight," he said kindly. "The wine, especially." "Oh, thank you, sir," she said, blushing. Though Mr. Quince was a bit loud. "Tell me, Lydia, did you ever see Miss Clarissa with the key to the study?" Lydia blinked. "No, sir. But I've seen her come in from the orchard after dusk. Sometimes looking flushed. Messy, that is all." As he returned to his guest room, Poirot reflected on what he had seen. Clarissa's secret meeting had not involved the diary, but it revealed much. The tension between what she chose to show and what she carefully concealed. A woman protecting something, or someone. The diary was still hidden. But someone had already paid a visit to the orchard. Someone who feared what might be revealed if the silence was broken. And Hercule Poirot, with every passing moment, was closing the gap. Chapter 4, The Scene Repeated. The next morning brought a steady rain, tapping against the tall windows of Greystone Hall like polite but persistent fingers. Grey light spilled into the breakfast room, dimming the silverware and muting the atmosphere. Even Harold Quince's usual bluster seemed dampened by the weather. Poirot, however, was in fine spirits. Rain, he often said, was a gift to the observant. It slows people down, makes them pause, sometimes just long enough to reveal themselves. After breakfast, as Lady Marchmont retreated to her room for rest and Clarissa went to the library, Poirot approached Dr. Illingham, who was sipping tea by the fireplace. "Doctor, might I borrow your assistance?" "Of course. What do you need?" "A gathering of minds," Poirot replied with a smile. "A small exercise. I believe a reenactment may draw useful detail from the recesses of memory." Dr. Illingham raised an eyebrow. "A reconstruction? Interesting. I'm game." With the doctor's help, Poirot soon assembled the household in the drawing room. Clarissa arrived reluctantly. Clarissa always arrived reluctantly. Mr. Quince groaned but complied. Theodore Blake drifted in quietly with a half-read botanical journal tucked under one arm. "I've asked you all here for a brief exercise," Poirot announced. "Lady Marchmont has kindly given her blessing. I would like her to describe, as precisely as she remembers, the night she discovered the diary missing. As she speaks, please listen closely. The smallest detail may prove significant." He turned to Lady Marchmont, who stood near the hearth, pale but composed. "I went into the study on a Thursday morning," she began, "to retrieve some documents for the solicitor. I unlocked the safe. It was closed, as always. But when I opened it, Archibald's diary was missing. Only the diary." "And the night before?" Poirot prompted. "Anything unusual?" "I recall going to bed early. Clarissa had returned from her walk. Harold and I spoke briefly in the parlour. The rest is hazy." Poirot nodded. "Were there any sounds, disturbances in the night?" Lady Marchmont hesitated, then said softly, "There was a noise. I thought I dreamt it, a soft sound, like fabric brushing against wood. I assumed it was the curtains shifting in the wind." At that moment, Poirot shifted his gaze to the others. Clarissa's expression had changed. She was still, but not still in the way of calm, still in the way of someone listening too intently, holding breath. "Thank you, madam," Poirot said gently. "Now," he continued, stepping forward, "I would like to ask each of you a simple question. Where were you that evening?" Dr. Illingham spoke first. "In my room reading. I rarely leave it after 10. Blake followed. "I was cataloguing notes in the orchid house. The humidity lamps failed again. I didn't return until near midnight." Mr. Quince gave a shrug. "Playing billiards. Alone. Not much company that night." Clarissa's answer was brief. "Walking in the orchard. I told Edwin." Poirot nodded slowly. "Indeed. And mademoiselle, did you hear anything strange upon your return?" Clarissa opened her mouth, paused, then said, "No. Nothing unusual." Poirot tilted his head. "Not even the soft sound your aunt described?" Clarissa's eyes narrowed. "I don't remember." Mr. Quince laughed suddenly. "This is nonsense. Anyone could have taken the blasted book. Why not the staff?" Poirot's voice sharpened. "Because, monsieur, this was no ordinary theft. Whoever took that diary knew its value, and the danger it posed." He turned to Theodore Blake. "Mr. Blake, how often do you visit the study?" "Only when Lady Marchmont permits," Blake replied quickly. "She's generous with her library. I always inform her." "Have you ever noticed the rug disturbed? Or smudges on the floor near the safe?" Blake blinked behind his spectacles. "No. I never looked." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "Then allow me to tell you what I see." The room stilled. The thief was careful. They entered with intent. They knew the diary was in the safe. They did not search, they went directly to their prize. They used the key, took the diary, and left no trace. He paused. Almost no trace. He stepped to the center of the room and pointed to the far rug. A single chair was moved. Slightly. Just enough to shift the rug. Enough to make a sound, fabric on wood. He let the words hang in the air. Then he turned slowly, eyes gliding over each guest. It was a small thing. But someone noticed. Someone who heard and remembered. "Lady Marchmont," he said, "you said you dismissed it as a dream. But dreams do not make dust stir. They do not explain why the rug edge was misaligned the next day. Someone was here. And not by accident." Clarissa spoke then, coldly. "So who was it, Poirot? If you know so much." Poirot smiled gently. "Not yet. But we are close." With that, he dismissed the gathering. That evening, Poirot returned to the study once more. There was something about the room that continued to nag at him. It was not the safe. It was not even the rug. It was the smell. He knelt by the chair again, the one nearest the fireplace. He lifted it carefully and examined the leg. There, faint but unmistakable, was a smudge. Not quite mud. Not quite Polish. It was recent. The wood was slightly damp. A trace of something organic, perhaps soil from the garden, or compost from the orchid house. He retrieved a small brush from his pocket and collected the residue, placing it into a glass vial. Someone had sat here recently. Not days ago, hours. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He stood and walked to the fireplace, noting again the faint scent that lingered in the room. Lavender. Not the lavender of sachets or soaps, but something more modern. A men's cologne, perhaps. And that meant someone had returned to the scene after the crime. But why? To gloat? Or to plant a false trail? As he returned to his guest room, the house now hushed under a veil of night, Poirot reflected on the game unfolding before him. He had seen how each guest responded when the past was spoken aloud, how Clarissa tensed, how Quint grew agitated, how Blake folded into silence. Dr. Illingham, poised, had watched them all. One among them was the thief. Perhaps more than one. But each had a reason to fear the truth. And fear, Poirot knew, was a clumsy thing, it left trails. Sooner or later, the silence would break. And Poirot would be there to listen. Chapter 5, The Second Silence. The storm broke in the early hours, with wind clawing at the shutters and rain hissing against the windows. Greystone Hall, solid and ancient, groaned beneath the weight of the weather. Most of the household had retired early, the day's tensions having worn thin even the most robust tempers. Poirot, however, was wide awake. Seated in a high-backed armchair in his guest suite, he was meticulously arranging a set of clues in his mind, like chess pieces waiting to be moved. The orchard meeting, the displaced rug, the faint scent of lavender, the fabricated innocence of certain alibis, it was all beginning to take form. The little grey cells stirred with anticipation. At precisely 2:30 in the morning, a piercing scream shattered the calm. Poirot was on his feet at once. The cry had come from the east wing. Grabbing his robe, he crossed the landing just in time to see Clarissa and Theodore Blake emerge from their rooms. Clarissa was white-faced, Blake half-dressed and clutching a book as if he might swat danger away with it. The door at the end of the corridor was wide open. Poirot pushed inside. There, slumped on the floor beneath the writing desk, lay Harold Quince, his head bleeding from a shallow cut just above the brow. Standing over him, eyes wide and trembling, was Mrs. Wren, the housekeeper. "I found him," she gasped. "I was coming to check the shutters, he was just lying here." Poirot bent down swiftly. The wound was superficial, a glancing blow. A heavy object, swung quickly, not with the intent to kill, but to scare. Or to make a point. "Clarissa," he said calmly. "Please fetch Dr. Illingham." As Clarissa ran, Poirot noticed something on the floor beside the fallen man, an envelope, torn open, its contents a single sheet of paper. He picked it up with gloved fingers. Typed, in bold capital letters, were the words, "Return what you took or suffer more than silence." Poirot's expression remained unreadable. Moments later, Dr. Illingham arrived, brisk and composed. He knelt beside Quince and examined the wound. "Not serious. He'll recover," he murmured. "Some bruising, nothing more. Likely stunned. I'll dress it in his room." Poirot nodded. "Let me know if he says anything useful." With the others dismissed, Poirot remained behind, alone in the study. He examined the scene with care. There was no sign of forced entry, no objects missing or broken, save a lamp knocked askew. The blow had not come from rage, it had been calculated. He returned to the note, reading it again. "Return what you took." A warning. But from whom? He turned to the fireplace once more. That faint scent of lavender remained, stronger now. Poirot leaned in, nose twitching. "I know you," he murmured. "You hide in perfume. You move among books and cigars, but you cannot erase your trail." Poirot straightened, eyes gleaming. Then he stepped to the wardrobe and flung it open. Boots. 4 pairs. Well polished. Except. He reached in and removed a space between two boxes. Empty. One pair missing. A heavy pair, judging by the gap. He stood in thought for a long moment, then exited the study. In the silence of the corridor, the house seemed to hold its breath. The following morning, Harold Quince was back on his feet, wrapped in a silk dressing gown, nursing a bandaged head and a bruised ego. "Bloody coward," he muttered over breakfast. "Struck me from behind. Didn't even give me a chance to defend myself." Lady Marchmont, pale and withdrawn, sat in silence beside Clarissa, who was pointedly avoiding Harold's gaze. Dr. Illingham buttered toast with surgical precision. Poirot cleared his throat. "A regrettable event," he said quietly. "But perhaps a necessary one. You see, the attack may not have been personal, it may have been theatrical." Harold glared at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means, monsieur, that the purpose of the blow may not have been to harm you, but to distract. Or to suggest danger where there was none." Harold snorted. "So now I'm faking my own injuries." "I did not say that. But I must ask, was the note in your possession before the attack?" Harold blinked. "No. It was on the floor when I came to. I'd never seen it before." "Then you believe someone struck you, and then left a note warning you about something you claim you haven't done?" Harold frowned, clearly following the logic only slowly. "I don't know what they want. I didn't take anything." Poirot's voice grew gentler. "Then why do you seem so nervous, Monsieur Quince? Why did you tell the housekeeper last week you were worried about what might come out? Or that the Marchmont family had a secrets that needed scrubbing?" Harold went very still. "I may have said something like that," he muttered. "People talk. I was just stirring the pot a bit." Poirot turned to Clarissa. "Mademoiselle, do you believe him?" Clarissa's expression was unreadable. "I don't care what he says. He's always stirring something." Poirot gave a small, knowing smile. Later that afternoon, Poirot ventured into the garden shed behind the orchard. It was a tidy structure, used to store tools and boots for gardening. There, tucked behind a row of watering cans, was a pair of mud-caked boots. Heavy. Sturdy. Not gardening boots. He bent to examine the soles. Distinct tread. Square toe. A shallow gouge across the heel. He remembered the print beneath the rug in the study, how deliberate it had seemed. A match. The boots belonged to Harold Quince. And yet they had been hidden. Back at the house, Poirot returned the note to Lady Marchmont, who handled it with gloves. "It's typed," she said quietly. "The same style as the old typewriter in the library." "Indeed," Poirot replied. "And only 3 people have used that machine recently." She looked up. "You know who wrote it?" "I know who did not. And that is enough, for now." Lady Marchmont sighed. "Monsieur Poirot, is this truly only about the diary?" Poirot's voice softened. "It began that way. But now, madame, it is about fear. The fear of what the past might reveal. And fear, I find, makes even honest people dishonest." She looked away. "We're all afraid of something, aren't we?" "Oh, Poirot said. "But only one person here is afraid of being discovered." That night, the storm returned. Poirot sat by his window, watching lightning dance across the fields. The diary was still hidden. But its presence lingered in every corridor, like smoke without fire. The attack on Quince, whether real or staged, had stirred the pot further. But now, he thought, the edges were fraying. The mask was slipping. And soon, the thief would be forced into the light. Chapter 6, Suspicions Multiply. By the next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind soaked earth and a tension in the air that no sunshine could dispel. At Greystone Hall, no one lingered over breakfast. The dining room felt colder, more watchful. Lady Marchmont's eyes were shadowed. Clarissa said little. Mr. Quince clutched his coffee like a life preserver. Only Dr. Illingham maintained his usual calm, though even he now seemed to observe the others more than engage them. Poirot waited until the table had cleared before beginning what he called, delicately, private moments for the truth. He started with Dr. Illingham. The doctor received him in the library, standing beside the French windows. Outside, the orchard glistened from the rain. He gestured for Poirot to sit. "I imagine you suspect everyone by now," Illingham said with a dry smile. "Not quite everyone, Doctor. But many people are guarding secrets. That, I have no doubt." The doctor poured himself a modest sherry. "And you think mine concerns the diary?" Poirot did not answer directly. "You served in the war, did you not?" "Yes. Field medical officer. I worked alongside Colonel Marchmont for a time." "Was he a good man?" Illingham exhaled slowly. "He believed in duty above all else." "That's not the same as being good." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Did you know the contents of the diary?" "Not specifically. But I knew what kind of decisions Archibald made. He sent men into danger without full orders. He concealed information, believing it safer that way. Some of those decisions cost lives. If the diary reflects that, it would raise uncomfortable questions for the families left behind." Poirot nodded. "And so it must not be made public." Illingham met his gaze. "That's not my decision. But I would understand anyone who felt that way." Poirot stood, adjusted his cuffs. "Merci, Doctor. You have given me more than I asked for." Next, Poirot requested a word with Clarissa. She agreed, though with visible reluctance, and led him to the morning room where sunlight filtered through gauze curtains. "You seem intent on stirring things," she said coolly. "That is the purpose of my presence, mademoiselle. Until the truth reveals itself." Clarissa folded her arms. "You've already decided I know more than I admit. Do you not?" She looked away. "Philip didn't come for the diary. He came for closure." Poirot raised a brow. "And yet, he left with something. Letters. Mine. I wanted to be rid of them." "Why now?" She hesitated, then replied, "Because I'm tired of this place, this life. I can't keep pretending it's all fine. My uncle's death didn't end the war he started." Poirot tilted his head. "You are loyal to Lady Marchmont. I owe her more than I can repay. But that doesn't mean I trust her." Poirot took a step closer. "Did you take the diary?" "No," her voice was sharp now. "But I'm not sure I want it returned, either." With a slight bow, Poirot withdrew. Her answer was not a lie, but it was not the whole truth. Outside, he found Theodore Blake in the greenhouse, tending to a collection of orchids. The air was humid, rich with the scent of damp moss and the sweetness of rare flowers. Blake jumped at the sound of Poirot's approach, nearly knocking over a clay pot. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, forgive me. I didn't hear you." "That is often the case when one is lost in thought," Poirot said lightly. Blake gestured toward a delicate pink blossom. "Dendrobium nobile. Remarkable resilience." Poirot looked around. You spend much time here. It's the only place in the house untouched by the past. Do you fear the past, Mr. Blake? Blake wiped his hands on a cloth. I fear what people do to hide it. Poirot studied the younger man. You were fond of Miss Marchmont, were you not? Blake flushed. That obvious. Only to the trained eye. You feared Mr. Quince's intentions. Why? He's a brute. He doesn't care for her, only what she represents. And he was pushing her to sell the orchid house. Poirot nodded. So you have a motive to dislike him. But what of the diary? Blake shook his head. I don't know what's in it. Only that it's made everyone here suspicious of everyone else. Did you type the note? Blake looked genuinely confused. What note? Poirot watched him a moment longer, then turned and left. Finally, Poirot confronted Mr. Harold Quince in his guest room. The industrialist was seated by the window, nursing a brandy even though it was barely noon. What now? He grumbled. Your boots, Poirot said. One pair is missing. Quince looked up, startled. How do you? They were found behind the orchard shed. With soil on them. Matching the print beneath the rug in the study. Quince paled. I didn't go in there. Not like that. Poirot Saturday, so someone took your boots and planted the evidence. Very well. But why would anyone frame you, monsieur? Quince swallowed hard. Because I threatened to find out the truth. I may have said things, loud things. I don't like games. I thought your presence would rattle someone. Poirot raised a brow. So you provoked a reaction deliberately? Yes. And I got it. Someone tried to make it look like I was the thief. I've never even seen the damn diary. Poirot paused, then asked quietly, then why did you tell Mrs. Wren the family secrets needed a scrubbing? Quince looked away. Because I read enough letters in the desk to know Colonel Marchmont wasn't a hero. But that's not my business. I wanted Clarissa to know the truth. That's all. Poirot stood. And yet the truth remains elusive. That evening, Poirot returned to the study. He sat alone with his thoughts, watching the fire flicker. One detail still bothered him. The smudge on the chair leg. Too perfect. As though someone had tried to leave a mark, but not too much. And the note. Typed. Left in plain sight. Dramatic, yes, but clumsy. All these were attempts to direct suspicion, not conceal guilt. A smoke screen. Somewhere within the lies, the real thief waited. Someone who knew how fear worked. How silence could be weaponized. Poirot whispered aloud to the empty room, they think they have outwitted Hercule Poirot. But the game is nearly done. Tomorrow, he would gather them all. And when he spoke, silence would no longer protect the guilty. Chapter 7, Threads of the Past. The next morning arrived cool and bright, the storm having finally spent itself. Sunlight fell across the gardens like a golden curtain, yet inside Greystone Hall, the atmosphere remained taut as a wire. Breakfast was subdued. Lady Marchmont declined to appear. Clarissa sipped tea without speaking. Theodore Blake's usually restless hands were still. Even Mr. Quince, bandaged and brooding, muttered only a few words about getting the hell out once this circus ends. Poirot ate sparingly, his expression unreadable. He made no accusations, asked no questions. But his eyes, those sharp, patient eyes, missed nothing. By mid-morning, he had requested a private conversation with Lady Marchmont in her sitting room. She was waiting for him, composed yet clearly worn thin by the week's events. "I sense," she said quietly, "that you are very close to some dreadful truth." "Very close, madam," Poirot replied. "But it is not dreadful." "Not yet. It depends what is done with it." She nodded. "Then ask what you must." Poirot took the armchair opposite her, folding his hands neatly in his lap. "The diary. You knew its contents were dangerous. But you did not share them with anyone, not even Clarissa." "I couldn't," Lady Marchmont said. "Some of what Archibald wrote, it would ruin him in the public eye. It would tarnish this family forever." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "someone else did read it. Before it was stolen." She looked up sharply. "You see," he continued, "there was a window of time. You last opened the safe in August. The diary vanished in September. In that interval, someone either accessed the key without your knowledge, or else someone already knew where the key was kept." Lady Marchmont's face was unreadable. Poirot pressed on. "Madam, did you ever suspect your late husband was not alone in his decisions during the war? That others may have assisted him, protected him?" She hesitated. There were whispers. But Archibald was never forthcoming. "Dr. Ellingham served beside him," Poirot said. "He admitted as much. And he knows more than he says." Lady Marchmont leaned back, eyes closed for a moment. "Basil would never betray us." Poirot smiled faintly. "Even the most honorable of men may justify dishonor, if they believe it serves a greater good." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "You found the diary, haven't you?" "I believe I have." He stood. "And it is time, madam, to bring the truth into the open. You must trust me to do so gently." She closed her eyes. "Then do what must be done." Poirot left her there, wrapped in silence. By late afternoon, the guests had begun to sense a change. Poirot's calm had become something else, something sharper. Intentional. Clarissa paced the upper corridor. Quince smoked furiously in the garden. Blake remained in the orchid house, all but hiding among the petals. Even Dr. Ellingham watched Poirot now with a kind of wary respect. Poirot made one final visit before dinner. He descended the servants' stair to the small library where the house's older documents were stored. Lydia, the young maid, was dusting shelves when he entered. "Ah, mademoiselle," Poirot said warmly. "Forgive the intrusion. I seek only one thing." She blushed. "Yes, sir." Poirot gestured to the typewriter on the corner desk. "May I?" She nodded. "Hardly anyone uses it now." Poirot sat and opened the ribbon cover. A recent ribbon. Clean, but not unused. He struck a few keys, A, R, M. The letters matched the threatening note precisely. He nodded, stood, and bowed slightly to the maid. "Merci, mademoiselle. You've been most helpful, though you may not realize how much." That evening, dinner was a tense affair. Poirot, dressed immaculately as always, dined with grace. He offered no hint of drama, no ominous remarks. But as dessert was cleared away, he stood quietly and said, "May I ask you all to join me in the drawing room? I have a small matter to conclude." There was a murmur of unease. Yet one by one, they followed him. The fire crackled in the hearth. Rain tapped faintly on the windows again. Poirot stood near the mantelpiece, the room arranged much as it had been on the night of the supposed theft. He cleared his throat. "My friends, you have been most patient. And I thank you. But now we have arrived at the end of our journey. The mystery of the missing diary, of the stolen silence, is solved. Clarissa drew in a breath. Mr. Quince sat forward in his chair. Blake's lips parted. Illingham's hands were clasped. Poirot began to walk, slowly, hands behind his back. Theft, you see, is not always about greed. Sometimes, it is about fear. About shame. About protection. And this theft was all three. He turned. Lady Marchmont's diary was not merely a war journal. It was a confession of moral compromises, tactical deceptions, and irreversible decisions. It implicated others. It revealed things long buried. He looked at Quince. Monsieur Quince, you did not steal the diary. But you did discover it, briefly. Quince blinked. I what? You found the key, during a visit to Lady Marchmont's dressing room. You took it out of curiosity, unlocked the safe. You read only enough to realize what it was. Then you panicked. You didn't take the diary, but you left the safe ajar, and someone else noticed. Clarissa's head turned sharply. Poirot faced her. You, mademoiselle, were the second to know. You saw the safe open. You suspected what it contained. But you said nothing, because you were trying to protect your aunt. Clarissa's voice was strained. I never read it. I swear. I believe you, Poirot said kindly. But you created the conditions that allowed the real thief to act. Now, Poirot turned to Theodore Blake. Mr. Blake. A quiet man. A careful man. And yet, it was you who planted the note. Blake stood. That's absurd. Poirot raised a hand. You used the old typewriter in the archive room. You forged the letter to frighten Quince. To create a scene. Because you knew suspicion would never fall on you. Blake was trembling. I didn't steal anything. No, Poirot said softly. But you knew who did. And you feared they would be discovered. Poirot turned at last. To Dr. Illingham. Doctor. You were the only one with full knowledge of what the diary might reveal. Because you were part of it. Illingham's face remained calm. You're speculating. No, said Poirot. I am deducing. You assisted Colonel Marchmont during the war. You co-signed certain decisions. Perhaps you thought they were right at the time. Perhaps you changed your mind later. But you could not risk their becoming public. Illingham rose, slowly. You cannot prove I took the diary. Poirot smiled. No, Doctor. But I can prove you returned it. He stepped to the sideboard, lifted a panel, and drew out a leather-bound volume. The missing diary. Gasps filled the room. You hid it again last night, Poirot said. After Mr. Quince's staged attack failed to draw attention away from you. You hoped that returning it would end the matter. Illingham closed his eyes. I thought, he whispered, that no one would get hurt. Poirot nodded solemnly. But lies, Doctor, always hurt someone. Tomorrow, Poirot would explain everything. Tonight, silence returned to Greystone Hall, this time, not stolen, but restored. The truth was no longer hidden. Only one chapter remained. Chapter 8, The Silence Unveiled. They gathered in the drawing room once more, just after breakfast, with the autumn light streaming through the tall windows, and the scent of old wood, coffee, and apprehension thick in the air. The chairs had been arranged in a semicircle, as if for a performance. Hercule Poirot stood before the hearth, his posture impeccable, his moustache immaculate, and his expression serene. "I thank you all for your patience," he began, clasping his hands. "You have endured days of uncertainty, of suspicion, and of fear. But now the truth is clear." He paused, sweeping his gaze slowly across the room. Lady Marchmont sat rigid, pale but composed. Clarissa sat beside her, arms folded tightly across her chest. Mr. Quince, his head still bandaged from his dramatic assault, leaned forward, lips twitching with tension. Theodore Blake hovered near the windows, hands in pockets, eyes flicking between Poirot and the floor. And Dr. Illingham, impeccable in his dark suit, wore a mask of calm so practiced, it had almost fooled Poirot. Almost. "My friends," Poirot continued, "you have all asked yourselves who stole the Marchmont diary. You have all looked at one another and wondered who might risk everything to possess its contents. But I tell you this, the theft was never about possession. It was about control." He turned and gently placed the diary on the desk behind him. "This book contains Colonel Archibald Marchmont's private account of his wartime activities, strategic decisions, confidential missions, and, perhaps most damningly, actions that led to the deaths of innocent civilians. These pages would not only tarnish his name, but implicate others who advised or authorized those actions." Poirot looked directly at Dr. Illingham. "Doctor, you were one such advisor." Illingham didn't flinch. It was war. Difficult choices had to be made. "Indeed," said Poirot. "But those choices have consequences. And when Lady Marchmont mentioned the diary had vanished, you knew what it meant. The past, once locked away, had returned. So, late one evening, you retrieved the key, while helping Lady Marchmont upstairs, perhaps. After a dinner conversation you stretched long enough to create the opportunity. You opened the safe and removed the diary. No forced entry. No damage. Just silence." Poirot turned to the others. But Dr. Illingham was not the only one who discovered the diary had been taken. Mr. Quince, ever curious, had already stumbled across it by accident, finding the safe open, the key forgotten on the floor. He read enough to know there were secrets inside. Quincy's eyes widened. "That's a lie." Poirot raised a hand. "Not entirely. You did not steal the diary, but you knew of it. You saw an opportunity. Perhaps you hoped to use it to pressure Clarissa into trusting you. Perhaps you hoped to win her favor by appearing protective. But instead of confronting the truth, you played games. You made veiled remarks. You dropped hints. And someone noticed." He turned now to Theodore Blake. "You, monsieur, typed the threatening note." Blake shook his head. "I never." "You did," Poirot said calmly. "You used the old typewriter in the archive library, one of the few in the house that still functioned. The imprint of your words matched exactly. You hoped to frighten Quince, to confuse the situation, and to protect someone." Poirot looked him in the eye. "You were protecting Clarissa." Clarissa gasped, but said nothing. "You believed," Poirot went on, "that she had taken the diary. Perhaps she had confided in you, in part. Perhaps you misunderstood. You thought to deflect suspicion by creating a scene, an attack on Quince, a threatening note. But instead, you muddied the waters and nearly destroyed her reputation." Clarissa stood. "I never took it. I saw the safe open one afternoon and knew something was wrong. But I didn't touch it." Poirot nodded. "Yes, mademoiselle. I believe you. You kept your silence out of fear for your aunt. For the family name. You were loyal." He now turned to Lady Marchmont, who had been sitting silently, unmoving. And you, madam? You feared the truth more than any of them. You knew what your husband had written, and you knew what it would mean if it were made public. She lifted her chin. I wanted to destroy it. Poirot bowed slightly. But you did not. Instead, you hid it again. You prayed the matter would simply pass. But the damage had already been done. He stepped to the hearth, folding his arms behind his back. Dr. Illingham returned the diary last night. He replaced it quietly, hoping that by doing so, he might erase the suspicion. But I had already seen the signs, the smudge on the chair leg, the faint scent of lavender, your cologne, Doctor. And the footprint beneath the rug, once planted to frame Mr. Quince, now became a signature. Poirot turned sharply to face him. You meant to protect the Marchmont name. But in doing so, you endangered everyone else in this house. Illingham finally broke his silence. What would you have done, Poirot? Let the past destroy everything we built. I would have let the truth speak for itself, Poirot said gently. We cannot rewrite what was done. But we can choose how we face it. There was silence now. A true silence. No one moved. Poirot let it linger, then stepped forward. There is no need for police. The diary has been returned. No one was killed. The worst injury was to pride, and perhaps to trust. He turned to Lady Marchmont. You must decide what to do with the diary now, madam. Whether to destroy it, seal it again, or publish it. But know this, hiding the truth never protects us. It only delays the pain. Lady Marchmont's voice was soft. I will read it again. Carefully. Perhaps with Clarissa. Together. Poirot inclined his head. A wise choice. He gathered his hat and cane from the sideboard. And now, I believe my time at Greystone Hall has come to an end. Will you not stay for supper? Lady Marchmont asked. Poirot smiled. Ah, non, madam. A mystery, like a soufflé, is best left once it has risen and settled. As he crossed the threshold, Clarissa called after him. Monsieur Poirot, how did you know, truly, who it was? He turned, eyes twinkling. Mademoiselle, I noticed everything, but most of all, I noticed who was silent. And in a house full of words, it is silence that speaks loudest. And with that, Hercule Poirot departed Greystone Hall, his shoes spotless despite the rain, his conscience clear, and his little grey cells quite satisfied.